Number 31, What to Watch Tonight, A Small Light on Disney+. When the Nazis rose to power, everyday heroes stood up to the horrific tyranny of the Nazi Party by bravely hiding, feeding, and smuggling Jewish citizens to freedom. By Alexander Lopez. Image description: the image above shows Miep Gies, the principal character and real-life hero of A Small Light. She is depicted with a serious expression, framed behind the words, "Risk everything." She holds a candle with a flame burning high behind the series title, A Small Light. Click on the image above to watch the show right now. Hello, my loves. Welcome back to Let's Thrive Together, a newsletter devoted to answering the age-old question, what should we watch tonight? Today's recommendation? A Small Light on Disney+. Also, today is my birthday, so you have to listen to me, hee hee. Winky face. Alright, let's dive in. Below are my top 3 reasons why you should make A Small Light your next binge. 1. This is a show that is both prescient and very ominous, given our present political moment. Image description: Miep Gies and Otto Frank are walking along a green foliage-filled path. Text in the foreground reads, even an ordinary secretary or a housewife or a teenager can, in their own way, turn on a small light in a dark room. Few shows rarely capture the anxiety of our current moment more perfectly than A Small Light, a series that chronicles the rise of the German Nazi Party and its impacts on the citizens of Amsterdam, Netherlands. When we meet Miep, our protagonist and hero, she is much like your typical millennial or Gen Zer. She has a group of friends, loves sleeping late, and is passionate about art and world issues, but is slightly directionless. So much so that her adopted mother and father suggest that she consider marrying one of her brothers, so as to give her life some meaning. A moment of silence for the blatant misogyny, sexism, and just straight-up ridiculousness that women have had to face since the dawn of time, even from their own family members. Oof. Miep's adoptive brother and would-be suitor, Cass, is homosexual, and the two laugh about the silly ignorance of their parents in a touching moment in which Cass commits himself to helping Miep solve the matter of her unemployment. The duo hopes that Miep finding a stable job will give her a bit of direction and get their parents off her back. After all, even Miep herself realizes that a girl of her intelligence and capability can't spend her entire life drinking until dawn and sleeping until noon, though her best friend Tess would be delighted if she stayed suspended with her inside their frivolous cocoon of perpetual adolescence. The show, based on true events, wastes no time in establishing Miep's legendary meeting with her eventual husband, Jan, on a fateful night out on the town with Tess, in which Jan awkwardly reads Kafka's Metamorphosis alone in a club, My Kind of Guy, as well as Miep's surprise turn as a new assistant and secretary for Jewish Dutchman, Otto Frank. Otto, who is the father of his posthumously famous daughter and runs Opakda, a successful jam business in the Netherlands. While Nazism and its horrors are mentioned, at the beginning of the series it is still 1933, and many of the characters of the show believe it to be an inevitability that Nazism and Hitler will fail, echoing similar sentiments to how so many believed figures like Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis and Alex Jones and Matt Gaetz and Ted Cruz were just outliers, on the fringe, that they could never actually rise to power and create real, lasting damage. However, as we've seen, and Miep comes to find out, nothing is impossible. You might even recall quite recently when we saw our own autocrat, Donald Trump, shock the world in 2016 with his unlikely rise to power, taking charge of the highest office of governmental and institutional United States authority. We have been dealing with the fallout ever since. Remember life before 2016? I do. Perhaps quite vividly because I worked for the Human Rights Campaign, Planned Parenthood, and the Democratic Party on the ground in New Hampshire in the half-year leading up to Election Day. Many of us recognized that Donald Trump was a dangerous and very real possibility right from the beginning, who was capitalizing on the populist sentiment of simmering rage against an established liberal economic class that many non-coastal Americans felt had left them behind, and even worse, was actively shaming and making fun of them. Organizers on the ground across the country worked non-stop, hoping to stamp out the rise of right-wing populism in its tracks. I remember working 100-hour weeks in the half-year leading up to the election, and while we secured narrow victories, especially in New Hampshire, securing a Democratic Senate, House, and narrow national razor-thin margin victory, the popular vote was still not enough to sway the Electoral College, which proclaimed victory for Donald Trump. I've never cried as hard as I did that night. If anything, that campaign and election confirmed for many the horrible truth that anything can happen, and as a result, we must prepare for all possibilities. Fast forward 7 years and things have only gotten worse. A once-in-a-century pandemic led to skyrocketing profits for the nation's most rich, and widespread poverty and death for the nation's most poor. Additionally, with the rise of surveillance capitalism and unlimited cheap access to recording devices and streaming video, we can now see in real time the horrific things happening globally and in our own backyards that have been underreported for generations. Further, faith in institutions is at an all-time low, with good reason, and many liberals and leftists are disappointed in establishment Democrats, who they feel have not delivered on campaign promises during their time in power. We can debate the complexities of gridlock from the Republicans and filibustering another day. Meanwhile, tech media moguls, in an ever-intensifying war for the last colonizable resource, our attention, have found a way to monetize and exploit nearly every second of our waking time, all the while destabilizing traditional news media and reliable fact-checked peer-reviewed journalism. As Olivia Rodrigo so wisely said in her 2021 hit single, "God, It's Brutal Out Here." It has been especially disheartening to see the conglomeration of outlets I used to hold dear. The New York Times' recent acquisition of feels like a canary in the coal mine of what we might expect going forward from a long-form journalism ecosystem that is routinely being pilfered and replaced by bite-sized, short-form ideas, as our attention spans grow increasingly shorter and shorter in direct correlation to our ever-increasing addiction to tech and social media. Perhaps Ray Kurzweil was right, the singularity is here. Or, put another way, we are already in the metaverse. Social media platforms, like Twitter, which used to be a safe haven for fighting disinformation, now are one of the chief arbiters in spreading it. Image description: a tweet from Steve Cox reads, "Twitter used to be such a great place to get a wide variety of information, often directly from the sources. It had problems, but it was such an incredibly valuable resource. And a billionaire man-baby bought it in a huff and then killed it under the guise of free speech." With right-wing tech billionaires taking over our democratic information systems, manipulating and creating space for anyone with $8 to burn, and allowing their public personas to become virtually indistinguishable from someone of actual societal repute, things are quickly descending into chaos. Not to mention, fascists like Ron DeSantis are rising up in the South, hell-bent on making Florida the first step in a nationwide effort to eradicate queerness from the public imagination. Read more about that here. And recently, it seems that one of the highest offices in the land, the Supreme Court, has continued its tirade of torment with 3 rulings in 1 week, an attack on affirmative action, 2 LGBTQIA+ discrimination, and the block of Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. I have never before felt more certain that fascism is rising again, and as a strong liberal and leftist, I believe it is my duty to shed light on corruption, intolerance, and injustice wherever it appears, so that we can stop such violence and hatred in its tracks, but I can't do it alone. As Jason Stanley noted in 2021, we are now in fascism's legal phase, and I ask you, what are we going to do about it? 2. This show shows how political oppression impacts every aspect of our lives and the importance of savvy community organizing to fight back against our oppressors. Photo description: a photo depicts Meet Geese closing a bookcase full of binders that serves as a secret door to the annex where she bravely hid Otto Frank and his family during Nazi occupation of the Netherlands. That's why I think it's important to watch a show like A Small Light, which chronicles the remarkable life of everyday organizer and freedom fighter, Meet Geese, the Vienna-born Dutchwoman who helped to hide Otto Frank and his posthumously famous daughter, Anne, during the years of Nazi power in Europe. The show is important because it shows how quickly fascism descends and how fast figures like Ron DeSantis can seize and manipulate societal fears and inequities, largely the result of greedy billionaires and exploitative corporations, and misplace the blame onto society's most vulnerable groups. In WW2, it was the Jewish community, the BIPOC community, the queer community, and the disabled. After the 2008 financial crisis, it was immigrants and poor people. Now, it is the BIPOC community, the queer community, and specifically the trans community, who are the most likely to be harmed by these oppressive regimes. More than ever before, a show like this truly matters, and I hope you will take time to watch it, to think critically about what happened, and what can you do in this current moment to stand up to hatred, bigotry, racism, classism, and systemic discrimination. Because if you've ever asked, what would I have done during the Holocaust, how would I have acted? I've got news for you, it's happening right now, and the time to become what your ideals might suggest is this moment, right here and now. 3. This show inspired action. Meep was an everyday hero, and if she can do it, so can we. What are actions you can take immediately? Image description: a moment of joy between a young Meet Geese and her husband, Jan, as they sit at a small dining room table with 2 house guests, all smiling at one another after finishing a meal. Below is a list of ideas I've brainstormed for actions we can take right now to fight injustice. Feel free to add, critique, expand upon, and chat about this list below in the comments. I welcome any and all feedback. amplifying and financially supporting the work of BIPOC, API, trans, fat liberation, and queer activists,